If you were on YouTube in the mid-2010s, then you've surely seen this iconic advertisement for a mobile game called Game of War Fire Age. The advertisement in question features a group of people surrounding a campfire, telling each other stories about the Legend 27, who's supposedly the highest ranked player in the world. This was before all the goofy ads about your Rise of Kingdoms power level, or even Mafia City. The Legend 27 and the other Game of War ads are, to my knowledge, some of the biggest mobile game advertising campaigns of their time, receiving over 400 million views on the channel as a whole. Game of War was a game you'd always see being advertised. Not just the Legend 27, but also interactive ads on other mobile games, and even other massive ad campaigns. But while their ads are one thing, the game itself has also achieved its fair share of accomplishments, even securing a spot on a list of the highest grossing mobile games of all time, in the 18th spot. But today, the game is never even mentioned, so I want to figure out what happened. How did a game in such a high spotlight end up disappearing completely? Well, to figure that out, we must start at the very beginning. Game of War Fire Age was developed by Machine Zone Inc., a company that may not seem all that familiar, but once you see their massive catalog of 4 games, you may be a bit more familiar with them than you might expect. Being founded in 2008, then starting mobile game development in 2009, Admired Inc. made a solid number of titles in their first 3 years of game development, but the games weren't getting any results. I wasn't able to find any footage for most of these games, specifically due to their generic titles. But man, I would love to see some gameplay for Original Gangstas HD. So yeah, with games like these, the company wasn't doing all too great. But $8 million in investing later, the company was renamed to Machine Zone, and they started working on their first game after this new rebrand, Game of War Fire Age. The game was released in July of 2013, nearly a full year after Clash of Clans. There's a pretty interesting reason I'm bringing that up. Game of War is a world-building simulation style game, where you have to build and defend a city, all the while having some of those social elements that make Clash such an addicting game. The gameplay loop revolves around you upgrading your city so you can defend from invasions that can happen whether you're playing or not. So as you could tell, the general gameplay shares a lot of elements with Clash, not to mention that they were also popular at similar times, leading to some stiff competition between Machine Zone and Supercell. In my video about the Clash series, I pointed towards the method of monetization to be both the game's greatest cause of income and its biggest point of contention. Of course, I'm once again talking about microtransactions. But while the Clash games are a little pay to win, Game of War pushes this monetization to its limits, and the reviews absolutely reflect that. Game of War has an average rating of 1.9 stars out of 5, with the majority of them being 1 star and complaining about the aggressive monetization. Meanwhile, Clash of Clans still carries a 4.8 star rating to this day. The trade-off is obviously the massive amount of income generated by the pay-to-win practice. While most users of a free-to-play game don't spend any money, the few that do end up spending a whole lot more than your average paid game. For example, the case of a child who stole his grandpa's credit card and bought $45,000 worth of in-game currency. So clearly the game wasn't designed with a very long-lasting, stable structure in mind, with its pay-to-win monetization scaring off anyone who wants to remain free-to-play. And those who stuck around weren't in the best situation either. The actual gameplay here, whenever you aren't fighting in a war, mostly come down to using in-game currency to upgrade your city, which is just waiting for a bar to go down and then spending more real money. So if the majority of people aren't having fun, then who's playing? Whales. The use of the term started at casinos, where the majority of gamblers wouldn't spend their entire life savings, but the few high rollers, or whales, would practically fund the casino. In a mobile game context, whales are the few players who are willing to spend the most money on microtransactions. While only about 3% of all mobile game players choose to spend money on free-to-play titles, those that paid to get ahead in Game of War spent an average of over $500. which is more than 5 times more than the average paying mobile game user's spending of $85. And with how heavy the pay to win is, I can only imagine the power rush of being able to obliterate your opponents by spending hundreds of dollars. There was even a 45-year-old California man who admitted to spending $1 million in embezzled funds on the game. Supposedly, the advertising budget was $40 million, so there's no wonder why this ad was everywhere, and it seems to have worked out, as there was a point in time where the game was earning over $1 million every single day. A lot of that budget went towards their 2015 Super Bowl ads, where they spent even more money hiring celebrities to be in these commercials. Some of these ads even made it to a comparable level to the Legend 27, which would come out a few years later. The last upload on their YouTube channel was posted 5 years ago, in April of 2017. It seems their production budget has been largely diminished, as the quality here doesn't even hold a candle to what they've made years earlier. At least, on the Game of War account. However, after doing a little bit of digging, it turns out that Game of War Fire Age isn't their only game released. And surprisingly, it isn't even the game with their most viewed advertisement. Going down on the list of the highest grossing mobile games, we have Mobile Strike, a similar game with the same monetization strategy, getting a celebrity and paying them a lot of money to be the face of the game. If you're wondering about the game itself, it's just a new look for an old game. Game of War with a modern recolor. They even did an ad similar to the Legend 27 years later, a much less successful ad campaign about a player called the Finger God. Don't you dare! Despite the higher viewed advertisement, the original game seems to have stayed on top. Not like it really matters, since they're fundamentally the same game, featuring the same practices. That same year, a former MZ employee began downloading private user data with the intention of distributing the spending habits of millions of players to competitors. This includes the dates, locations, ages, and even what items and costs work the best, as well as when the cost of an item gets players to quit. It turns out that the FBI got involved, and the employee was arrested and charged for his actions. When real money gets involved, the Game of War goes far deeper than the screen of a smartphone. The company rebranded to MZ in 2016, and later that year they partnered with Square Enix and came out with a new game. You guys want to see something funny? Yep, they made the same game a third time but with Final Fantasy characters. Their last appearance on YouTube as a whole was in May of 2020, where they released a YouTube short for their Final Fantasy game. It didn't seem to have been an advertisement as the view count isn't that high, but likes, dislikes, and comments were all disabled. My theory is that they wanted to capitalize on shorts by making one themselves. Then they disabled ratings and comments to keep people from complaining about their advertising. Either way, that seems to be the last time they've been on YouTube. But it isn't the last time they've been on social media. Their last tweet was on an account for Mobile Strike on April 16th of 2022, the same day that the Game of War Facebook also made its last post. Since then, it's been nearly a full year and we've seen no new information from them. The last updates for Game of War and Mobile Strike were both on July 20th of that year, with the Final Fantasy game last being updated a full month earlier. So what really happened here? Well, in May of 2020, they were actually bought out by another mobile game company, AppLovin, for $500 million, only 10% of their peak value. Then, after collecting a paycheck, they sold out and moved on to other ventures. Maybe they'll return, maybe they won't. There's no way to tell. Nowadays, they seem to be more interested in the blockchain, which isn't too surprising when you consider how everything involving it has been widely known for its prevalent scams in recent years. The current MZ CEO and co-founder, Gabriel Layden, has founded an NFT gaming company called Limit Break. And wow, this website sure does look legit. Please give me a free dragon NFT, please. Also, on a side note, I'm not saying it's a scam. Just tread carefully when it comes to anything crypto, as you never know what is a scam. Also, now you can't sue me for defamation. Machine Zone isn't a mobile game company. They were never that much of a software company either. They're more like an advertising agency selling a half-assed product. Game of War and its follow-ups are the laziest types of games. They didn't even make a game, they made a money farm, and it worked, superfluously. 2.8 billion from Game of War, and an extra billion from Mobile Strike alone. Then an extra 500 mil for the buyout. All because of some clever advertising and data studying to see what works. They used a Trojan horse to win the battle, and at the end of things, they won the war.